Okay, so let's begin. Let's relax our minds and bodies and try to first focus our attention with mindfulness on the breathing. If the mind is overcome with discursiveness, you can imagine breathing in calming blessings of the Buddhas when you breathe in the form of white light. And as you breathe out all your discursiveness, all those thoughts, as though you're breathing them right out the two side channels, out your nostrils. All the discursive, conceptual thoughts. And follow one breath down to your heart, and with your mental consciousness now, instead of focusing on the breathing, focus on just the nature of the mind behind the thoughts. It has a different nature than the busyness of the thoughts themselves. It's spacious and empty. It has the same continual appearance as clear light. Let go of the sense of the body that's appearing within your mental consciousness, but does not have to be attended to. Let it dissipate as you let go of other thoughts in the same way, your attention. Let go of the sense of the ego and the sense of a duality between the observer and the object observed. Think whatever other outside situations might be taking place. At this moment I have a life of leisure and endowment, as the Buddha explained, sometimes called a perfect human rebirth, or at least most of the features, with which I can practice the Dharma as the great beings of the past have done. All of the temporary disappointments or desires pale in comparison to what can be done with this mind in terms of Dharma, its great purpose, its great utility. Many living beings don't have that opportunity now. They're born in the unfree states, or even as a human, many obstacles having created very violent crimes, or being very opinionated, predisposed against the Dharma, so attached to their worldly pursuits that they don't find the space and time to actually think about, practice the Dharma. So while we have this opportunity to use it for the greatest benefit in every moment by practicing the meditations on the altruistic mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, we can create so much virtue, purify so much negativity by the practice of observing the reliance upon a spiritual friend, guru. In the same way, accumulate merit that might take eons, countless eons, to accumulate in a very short amount of time. And in so doing, provide the basis to develop special wisdom, which is the real aim of the Buddhist path, that provides the essential ingredient to overcome our own delusions, to achieve omniscience, conjoined with the altruistic mind of enlightenment, so that instead of being a problem for others, a burden for others, instead of being part of the problem, we can be part of the solution for sentient beings, leading them, inspiring them. So think for that purpose, in order to better understand the mind, to develop my good qualities and virtuous mental factors, to overcome the negative, I'm going to meditate, listen to, contemplate, meditate on the teachings on the mind, primary minds and their mental factors. to better acquaint myself with this territory, unknown, seemingly untamed territory within my consciousness, the laboratory of the mind. Relax. Bring your attention back to the present. How's everyone? Good? A little bit cold? Probably people in Minnesota or other places would think we're sissies. It's California cold. They'd consider this a warm day. So, how are we doing? Any questions about what we've been studying? Have you? Oh, good. Can't find a question. I thought this might be the date of the coffee, 12/16/20. Very old coffee. It means something else, obviously. Is that the size of the container? Oh, I see. How many ounces or something? 12, 16, or 20 ounces.
It was just about belief. And on page 28, where it describes belief, it gives an example of having a valid cognition, and then it says, then you have a firm belief. And maybe I'm reading it when it makes it sound like you have to have a...
Which page? Page 20?
Page 28.
Oh, 28. So, say that again?
Towards kind of the bottom of the paragraph on belief, it says then, well, halfway through, then when the doctrine taught by him in the spiritual community, properly practicing this doctrine. The doctrine are also ascertained by valid cognition to be infallible refuges. A firm belief in them is a final refuge is gained. It's using that as an example, and I'm reading it like you have to have a valid cognition to have belief. Am I just reading it?
Mm. Wow. Let's see, what does it say? For example, this is talking about the mental factor mubba, belief or appreciation rather. Just as has been said above, it is a knower which holds the object that has been ascertained by its valid cognition, thinking it is just this and not otherwise. So this is a mental factor, like say for instance when we talk about subsequent cognition, it's something that realizes an object which has previously been realized. So you can't really have this mental factor appreciation. You can't really appreciate something unless you previously ascertained the qualities of that. So that's, I think, the first part of it.
But are you ascertaining them through valid cognition, or could it just be?
What was previously, you previously ascertained something through valid cognition, I think. And then here it says, for example, reflecting upon the difference between the Buddhist and non-Buddhist teachers in the context of going for refuge, one analyzes which is an infallible refuge. That is Buddha an infallible refuge, or is, filthy lucre? I was thinking my room was given. You know what lucre is?
I've heard of it, but I don't remember.
It's not sucre. I was thinking filthy sucre, dirty sugar or something. Lucre, who knows what lucre is? Do you know? Yeah? Money. Filthy lucre is what, I think, does it come in the Christian scriptures somewhere, or popular scriptures? Filthy lucre, just dirty, just ordinary money. What's an infallible refuge? one of my dear uncles says he helps to overcome his insomnia at night. Instead of counting sheep, he counts $100 bills being counted out to him. So that's his refuge, I think. So which is, you're analyzing. And in so doing, when you analyze and you ascertain that only the founder, the teacher, the Buddha, is an infallible refuge, then when the doctrine taught by him in the spiritual community properly practicing this doctrine are also ascertained by valid cognition to be infallible refuges, a firm belief or firm appreciation in them as final refuges is gained. So in some contexts, the word belief, sometimes the word appreciation works better. Appreciative belief. So this kind of belief is not just like when we talk about correct belief, this is based on some kind of something that's been ascertained previously. So an ascertaining consciousness is usually one which has realized some aspect of something. Okay. Okay. So about, see, Jeffrey Hopkins, the section in his book, Meditation on Emptiness, on the minds and mental factors, is drawn from the same text. He doesn't translate every nook and cranny of each definition, but he puts together sometimes some very clear, I think because knowing the Tibetan very well and studying it with the Tibetan lamas, let me just see what he says about that mental factor, how he translates. Where are we here? Discrimination, here we go. Belief. Belief holds an ascertained object to be just as it was ascertained. So it appreciates that which, maybe you could say in that sense, once you've ascertained something, it keeps that appreciation. Like when you say, I appreciate good music, that means you've already somehow perceived it as good, right? And you're keeping that sense of cherished value in it, which allows your mind then to remain on it. So I think one of the functions of this, what does it say? Here the function is specified as non-captivation, because when one has gained firm belief in the object that one has ascertained, an opponent cannot steer one away from it. Okay, so if you like the Jerry Garcia, what are they called? The Grateful Dead. If you appreciate the Grateful Dead, having ascertained the good qualities, even someone tries to tell you some other music is good, it doesn't sway you away. Right? Okay, anyone else have a question? Carrie? Yeah? No? Okay. LaDonna? No? You do. Don has a question.
It says that primary mind and mental factors, since they occur simultaneously, one can never be the cause of the other.
Because okay.
Because they're simultaneous.
Okay. So what does that mean? Who can it? So what's the contradiction?
Well, that's not the question. That's the basis. Then on 105, when it's talking about the five scenarios.
You're talking about the five?
Under contact.
Mm-hmm. Contact is the cause of
it says,
the feelings.
Although it acts as a basis for feelings, it does not act as the basis for the feeling that occurs simultaneously with it. It only acts as the basis for feeling that arises subsequent
Did you hear what he
to
said?
it.
Could you hear over there?
No.
So he's talking about. No. It's okay. Well, if you read it, project your voice over to the.
Although it acts as we're referring to contact, the mental factor contact. Although it acts as a basis for feelings, it does not act as the basis for the feeling that occurs simultaneously with it. It only acts as the basis for feelings that arise subsequent to it.
And Don was pointing out that earlier in the text, or later somewhere in the text, it says that minds and mental factors that are simultaneous do not act as cause and effect of one another. Is there any contradiction? Saying the same thing, isn't it? At any one moment, the minds and mental factors that are present at one moment have a natural relationship with one another. Remember, did we talk last time about natural relationship and causal relationships? If they're simultaneous in one consciousness, bearing 5 similarities, they have a natural relationship with that mind. So they're not cause and effect of one another. So, but we do say that contact, the mental factor contact, is the cause of feeling. So how could that be? The feeling that's simultaneous with it is not its effect. It's easy, right? No. Well, support, there are different kinds of support, but it's, that's, unless you understood the right way, that wouldn't be the right answer. What were you thinking?
It's just that it's the very previous moment of contact is then being...
Right, it's not as though there's only one moment of the 5, of these 5 mental factors or the 51 mental factors. There's a whole sequence, you know. So the contact of a previous moment acts as the cause of the feeling and discrimination and so forth of the next instant. And the contact of that's simultaneous with the feeling and so forth, that's acting as the cause of the feeling and contact and so forth of the next instant.
So sort of like the previous moment of consciousness is the cause, right?
Yeah, in a similar way, that is a previous moment of consciousness in general is the substantial cause of the next moment of consciousness. Here, yeah, some of the mental factors are causally related. Anyway, any of the mental factors that are simultaneous with one another, they can't be in a causal relationship with one another according to the Buddhist schools other than the Vaibhashikas. The Vaibhashikas said that it could be. They could be simultaneous. There were such things as simultaneously acting conditions. But from the higher tenet's point of view, that's erroneous. So do those two facts fit together now? Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Mark?
So, John, there's always consciousness in the 5 mental factors? Because there has to be a first
A
moment.
wee bit louder, Venerable.
It's like, there has to be a first moment. Because I understand it's the previous one that brings
Yes.
the next part of feeling. So there's not a first moment. It's because the consciousness comes and goes and goes and goes, even from past lives. Even when you get reborn, there's
Well,
the 5 mental factors.
well, if you're talking about any particular stream of consciousness, say for instance, when you're asleep, your consciousness is unmanifest, right? So when you're waking up, there will be moments in the first moments of waking up when not all, remember when we talked about the 5 mental, omnipresent mental factors, we said they're always there in fully qualified consciousnesses, and some exceptions were at the time of wakening or sleeping, at the time of birth or death, time of intoxication or falling, what do you say, when you're unconscious, you've been knocked, slugged or something. So at the time of waking, there will have to be a moment when there's contact actualizing, let's say, a sense consciousness, and then the feeling and discrimination and so forth can arise the next instant. So that would be a good example. So it's not as though there's always some, like this question about beginningless time or something like that, where was the first contact? There will be, in any one stream of consciousness, contact is always there in an unmanifest form, but in any properly, fully actualized consciousness, the 5 omnipresent mental factors will all be manifest. But there are some, exceptions at the boundaries, like at the first moment of awakening and so forth. There'll have to be a contact first that acts as the very next moment's feeling, the support, the cause of the next moment's feeling, discrimination and so forth. Mark, you had a question.
No, I was just...
I wanted to give the men a chance because there's only a few of us for a question.
Well, it wasn't really a question. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
A mental factor can be the cause of another mental factor. But
Example?
Not contact can be the cause of feeling.
Yes.
But according to this contact, a mental factor can never be the cause of the primary consciousness in which it rises.
It can't be the cause of the mental fact of the primary consciousness. Depends on what you mean. It can be a condition that conditions it, the next instant of consciousness. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So then, George, I'm just imagining these omnipresent mental factors as sort of like a bridge that's always there in the primary consciousness, able to, at any moment, activate all the other mental factors. They're like the top of the hierarchy of all the mental factors that are generated from these omnipresent mental factors.
I'm not sure the others are generated from them. I mean, they're generated, other mental factors, they're generated, maybe in a sense they're generated from them because you need not only contact, but you need intention to move the mind and attention to something, and then wisdom and other things can arise. It's not so much that these are called the causes of the other ones, but these are always going to be there. Whatever else is there, these are always going to be there. Okay, good. So last time we began these object ascertaining mental factors, the 5 object ascertaining mental factors, which are, of course, LaDonna, you know what the 5 object ascertaining mental factors are?
Aspiration, belief, intention, contact, attention.
Oh, pretty close. That was good to get that you had some inertia there, but contact, intention, those are in the omnipresent mental factors. Right?
Oh,
Okay. So you had, is it appreciate, what did you say?
Oh, okay. Aspiration,
Aspiration, belief,
mindfulness, meditative stabilization, and wisdom.
Wow, I'm impressed. There is someone who studied. I think your brother must have. Either he was too boring to be with and you studied, or you two studied together. I'm joking. It was nice that he came around. Did you get that? So the aspiration and belief or appreciation, then mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Okay, so last time we talked about aspiration as the foundation for enthusiastic perseverance, remember, amongst other things, and that it was induced by, sometimes by faith, when we talk about the aspiration to develop single-pointed concentration, which is one of the main things that's mentioned here, that's induced by the faith in the good qualities of that. Yes.
So when you say the 5 object ascertaining mental factors, and these are the elements that make up those, but is there sort of a kind of higher level explanation of what is really meant by object ascertaining mental factors?
As opposed to a lesser understanding that we have.
As opposed to sort of breaking it down into the 5 elements.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the last page of this section. What is it? Where it talks about why they're called that on page 33, I think, right? It says discussion of the category of object ascertaining mental factors. What's the reason for calling these 5 mental factors intention and so forth? Intention? Does she have that right? Must be aspiration. Yeah, she's made a spelling mistake there, or she's copying somewhere else. Why are they called object ascertaining? Since these mental factors hold through apprehending, or they produce apprehension having, let's say, they hold or produce apprehension having apprehended the individual features of the object They are said to be individually, they are said to individually ascertain objects. So there's another name, in another word in the title of it sometimes. Sosor means individually. So they know or apprehend or hold objects through apprehending the individual features. Okay, they individually ascertain objects. So these are not, as far, generally, I think in the Mahayana tenets, these are not present in the sense consciousnesses. You might think that you have samadhi in the sense consciousnesses, but in general, the sense consciousnesses do not ascertain something. Ascertaining has a certain sense of having been produced by the mental consciousness. So you don't have an aspiration within the sense consciousness, let's say the eye consciousness, or belief or appreciation in the sense consciousness. Mindfulness almost sounds like you might. Sometimes there's some discussion in some of the scriptures about even some of the other mental factors, like attachment and so forth, whether they might be present in the sense consciousnesses. In general, I mean, there might be some kind of argument, but in general, these are not going to be present in the sense consciousnesses. These are only things that take place in the mental consciousness. So they're a little bit different than the omnipresent. Omnipresent are going to be present in every consciousness, including the eye, the sense consciousnesses.
Is it sort of is this the process that we kind of go through in sort of integrating the perception of something as separate from ourselves?
Not. Is this the process that we go through in ascertaining something as separate from ourselves? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, that's probably not a good way of explaining it.
Well, it makes some sense. These mental factors may not be necessary to ascertain that, because even to the sense consciousness, there's a sense of separateness. A separateness appears, right, to our sense consciousnesses. In fact, from the Chittamatra point of view, those are the people who are studying tenets will sort of pick up on this. From the Chittamatra point of view, that's an error that phenomena are distant and cut off from the consciousnesses that are apprehending them, but they do appear that way. So that sense of difference is not something that's brought about by these object ascertaining mental factors. It's something that the way that phenomena appear due to the imprints left in our consciousness since beginningless time, how they appear due to our karma and so forth. Okay, let's go on a little bit further. So we talked about aspiration, we talked about appreciation or belief, right? And that was one of the questions Diana had at the beginning. It's also about something that you have previously ascertained. Now the third one here is mindfulness, smriti. What does that sound like? What was it? Do you remember that movie? What was it? Something sense of snow? Smell sense of snow. Snella. Smriti. Here in Sanskrit, the translation that John Donne had prepared, they didn't have it spelled right. If you were to write it in Sanskrit in Roman characters, you would write it S-M-R, and the R has a dot under it. It's a semivowel. T-I, smriti. That R actually is like a re sound, smriti. Pardon?
She was looking for it here.
No, in John Donne's translation, it's not here. When they put the Sanskrit in, they put a dot. They put SM with a dot under the M, RTI. Smriti. So mindfulness is a very, very important factor, and we find it very much enshrined in the Theravada tradition. Has anyone ever done a course where you did a meditation on the 4 close placements of mindfulness? Satipatthana. Have you heard of that? Sati. Have you, Brish? Satipatthana? We've heard that term. Like sometimes when you're in India and some of the Theravada courses, they'll be on Satipatthana. Sati is the Pali spelling pronunciation of smriti. So why don't they have smriti? Because generally, if you find in Pali, if you have 2 different consonants conjunct to one another, they simplify it. Here there's this SM. It's not so much the R. The R is a vowel. But that smriti, they write in Sanskrit, in Pali as sati. Sati means mindfulness in the Pali scriptures. Patthana in the Sanskrit would be upasthana. So that patthana means to place or to closely place, upasthana in Sanskrit, the mindfulness on certain objects. So this is one of the very, very important practices that the Buddha taught in the Pali Canon. It's called the Satipatthana Sutra. Have you heard of that, the Satipatthana Sutra? It's one of the big, the current Theravada tradition, it's one of the sutras that's called on, besides the sutras that talk about Vipassana, the Maha Vipassana Sutra, they talk about Satipatthana, as though the Satipatthana, close placement of mindfulness, is this essential method to achieve liberation, or Vipassana is essential method to achieve liberation. They're different mental factors, obviously. They're different states, rather. Generally, there are 4 close placements of mindfulness when we talk about Satipatthana or Smriti Upasthana. There are 4. There's placement of mindfulness on the body, or on the physical, you could say, on the feelings. Do you know this, Lena? Have you heard me? On what? On consciousness and on phenomena. So sequentially becoming more and more fine. All of the meditations that you find generally taught in the Theravada tradition, the walking meditation. Oh, so let's start from the breathing meditation. The breathing meditation, watching the inhalation and the exhalation, this is one of the limbs of the close placement of mindfulness on the body or on the physical. You're actually watching something physical. Okay? Then when you get up, when you get tired of that, you also watch your posture, which is a part of close placement of mindfulness in the body. Then when you get up, you do the walking meditation. Have you done the walking meditation? Mark, have you done? Walking very, very carefully. Sometimes people might think it has something to do with elegance, or, if they don't understand the point of it, they're walking very slowly and elegantly. It doesn't have to do that. It has to do with being mindful of every motion of the body. The foot, say, touching the ground. What do you touch with first? The heel? Yeah, generally, yeah. Unless you're tiptoeing. Heel, and then coming down, and then rising again. Being mindful of all of that. The same thing with eating, when they do the close placement of mindfulness in the eating, which is in the close placement of mindfulness on body. Recognizing the motion of the arm and the motivation behind it, and tasting and eating very, very slowly, chewing, masticating. I think I've told you the story before. When I was at, generally, if you eat very, very slowly, things will begin to taste a bit different. I'm sure you know that, right? Those of you who have a healthy lifestyle, if you take even a little piece of bread and that otherwise you might not think about it, and you just chew that and just savor the flavor, you start to be mindful of and be aware of flavors that you weren't aware of before. Once at our monastery, when I first went to Kopan in 1974, I think it was, we had a group of French people that were at the course, and in the morning, we had, after the morning meditation, when there was breakfast, there was some sort of porridge. I think they would call it gruel. The French. It's a little too British or something. So when they were in line, the first couple of days waiting for this was being plopped out on the plate, they were saying, where is the omelette? Where is the croissant? Where is the café? Expecting, French breakfast. And I remember watching them eating. They're sitting by watching the sunrise and, showing disdain and putting this away. After a couple of days of meditation, when their minds had calmed down, the very same people were eating the very same porridge or gruel or whatever you want to call it with incredible pleasure. Watching the sunrise and everything. So mindfulness of the body is something that's very, very, it is a introduction to one of the Four Noble Truths. In the Mahayana Sutras, it says that the Buddha taught the four close placements of mindfulness as entries into the Four Noble Truths, into the truth of suffering, the truth of cause of suffering. Because secondly, when you're mindful of feelings, why would that be an entry into the truth of suffering, and the truth of cause of suffering? When you're watching the feelings? Yeah, but that would be suffering, right? This is said to be an entry into the cause of suffering.
Because then you realize how your life activates your own suffering through the way you respond to your life.
Yeah, how you respond to the feelings, you create more. Because remember when we talked about feelings, they are the energizers for developing attachment or hatred or indifference and so forth, which are the causes of suffering. So it's a little more subtle than appears at first. The close placement of mindfulness on consciousness then, as we do something similar to that when we watch the mind, which is more akin to what's called Mahamudra meditation, but there they watch the consciousness and have some kind of beginning taste or entry into the truth of cessation. And when they meditate on when they have placed their mindfulness on phenomena, impermanence and selflessness, that is an introduction to the fourth noble truth, the truth of the path. Okay, so sometimes people wonder why in the Mahayana tradition we don't have those same kind of meditations. Have you heard of those, Lisa? Those meditations, close placement of mindfulness, maybe in the Goenka tradition and some of the modern, in the so-called Vipassana, or the mindful. What's it called in Massachusetts, Barre, Massachusetts, Insight Meditation Center and things like that, which is talking about Vipassana, but mainly a lot of their courses are talking about the four close placements of mindfulness. Why don't we find that in the Mahayana? Is it like something that was lost? No, it's actually, you find in the scriptures, but the great lamas say that in the Mahayana, these four close placements of mindfulness are not taken as the main objects of mindfulness in post-meditation, as in the Theravada. You're watching the body and the feelings and so forth. The main thing that's taken in the Mahayana is the mindfulness to develop bodhicitta. So the mindfulness of the kindness of all sentient beings, the shortcomings of the self-cherishing thought, the mindfulness on the benefits of cherishing others and so forth. And in the Lojong, like we studied in the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, being mindful of those various factors whenever anything occurs, to remember that it's a result of karma, be mindful of that, and to use that to help overcome, to fight the two obstacles, the self-grasping and the self-cherishing thought. So it's not as though the four close placements of mindfulness are lacking in the Mahayana. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's see what the actual definition of this is. Regarding the entity, which essentially means, in this context, means the definition of mindfulness, the Abhidharma Samuccaya says, what is mindfulness? It is non-forgetfulness of the mind with respect to a familiar object. It has the function of non-distraction. Non-forgetfulness. And it has to be with respect to something which is already familiar. So again, it's sounding a little bit like what we were talking about before when we talked about subsequent cognition or belief. It's something which has already been known, something that's already familiar. How can you keep something in mind that's not already familiar? So you have to, when we're trying to be mindful of something, you have to first try to recognize that. That's why when we do meditation, when we try to focus our mind on something, the first stage is trying to identify the object. And then you can be mindful of it. And once you're mindful of it, then you can develop concentration on it. There's stages. First you have to find the object. So sometimes that's why the breathing is so easy, because the breathing is very easy to find, right? There might be some people, when you say focus on your breathing, they don't know where to focus, you know. You have to be a little bit aware that you're breathing and just pay attention to that. That's pretty easy to find. But how about if you try to visualize the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha or whatever? There you have to construct that object. You have to find that object by relying upon some description or some previous looking at a tanka or a statue, or if you had the fortune to see the Buddha themselves, you know, on the basis of that, to that familiar object, to bring that to mind, then you can begin to develop the mental factor mindfulness. Mindfulness has a function of non-distraction. So in terms of single-pointed concentration, mindfulness will be there also along with single-pointed concentration, which is coming next, one of the samadhi. Mindfulness will also be there, and it's the part of that kind of tranquil mind that's holding an object that doesn't allow you to be distracted, that keeps to the object, that doesn't allow you to be distracted. Okay, so it's a cause of concentration. So, as is said here, it is a knower. Mindfulness is a cognition that possesses three features. These three features are the objective feature, that is a familiar object. It has to be something which is already known. The aspective feature, subjective feature, a non-forgetfulness, that means from the side of how the consciousness is acting, what it's doing, it doesn't forget the object, having observed that object. Can you imagine, can you recognize that when you're trying to, say, watch the clear light nature of your mind? The more mindfulness you have of that, the more you can prevent forgetting that, losing that object, the more you're mindful of it. And the third is here's this functional feature. The feature of function is non-distraction. It functions to prevent distraction. What is distraction? Distraction is when you have an object in mind. It's talking about a particular mental factor that's, I think in Tibetan we say yengwa, nampar yengwa, means to, when the mind moves to some other object. In general, there are, the main kind of distraction is the kind of distraction that's due to attachment, right? Do you know this when we talked about concentration? Brish, have you studied that before? When we talk about concentration, the main obstacle, the main kind of distraction is not like distracted to something that bums you out. That could, maybe at our level, that can be a big distraction. You know, something's worrying you. But when you're actually concentrating, the main kind of distraction is when you're subtly distracted to something which is attractive due to attachment. That's what we call, sometimes it's translated as excitement, is coming later when we talk about these different So there's different kinds of obstacles to concentration. So you could say there's a general kind of distraction. We say namyeng, nampa-yengwa, Y-E-N-G. That means distraction in general. But the main kind of distraction is distraction to something which is captivating to you, sort of like, easily, it's not that difficult because it's not attractive. It's not that difficult to avoid being distracted to what's unattractive. At first, worrisome things might be distraction to you, but later, it's more difficult to prevent the mind being, going to something which is kind of comfortable, even sort of being attracted to the bliss of the concentration, or the superficial kind of state that it brings. So, mindfulness has the function of preventing this kind of distraction. This is what we have to, when we go through the 9 stages, the 9 mental abidings, to develop tranquil abiding. Mindfulness is sequentially enhanced along those levels to get rid of, this kind of distraction that is mainly the main kind of distraction that's called excitement. Okay, the other kind of hindrance to single-pointed concentration is the sinking mind. We'll talk about that later. That has a different antidote. Okay, so now it goes into detail about these 3 features of the definition. So remember, mindfulness is a non-forgetfulness of the mind with respect to a familiar object having the function of non-distraction. So there's 3 features here. Mindfulness is not produced with respect to that which has not been previously familiarized with. That's the first feature, the objective feature, right? The objective feature is stated, thus the objective feature is stated as a familiar object. Okay? Even though the mind might have been previously familiarized with an object, if it does not presently dawn as an object of the mind, mindfulness will not occur. Okay, it's just because you knew something in the past, if it doesn't come to your mind now, mindfulness is not actualizing. Thus, the subjective aspect feature is specified as non-forgetfulness of the mind. It keeps the object from being forgotten. It holds the object. So in that sense, it's kind of like you can also use the word memory, right? Or does it keep it in mind, mindfulness? And then the stability of the mind is enhanced in dependence on special mindfulness. Since that, its functional feature is specified as that of non-distraction, the stability of the mind. So there's 2 features in fully qualified concentration. The 2 features that we try to develop when we have concentration are stability and clarity. Okay, like say you could be stable on some object. Well, let's say if you're not stable, you lose the object completely. You're distracted. You have the object, you're breathing for one moment, and then you're thinking about pizza pie or, I don't know what else you're thinking of. Grateful Dead, or you want to see the new Matrix, was it Revolution? You're distracted to something else, so that your mind is not, there's not the factor of stability. Sometimes we can keep something stable for only a very short amount of time, isn't it? How about you, Dorje? Can you keep it for a long time?
Couple seconds.
Couple seconds?
Maybe. On a good day.
On a good day. That's not bad. So we have to enhance that stability. The other factor in developing concentration is clarity. And the thing that's causing the unclarity of the mind is the sinking, the factor of when you bring the consciousness inside to the mental consciousness, bring your attention inside, sometimes if you're not skillful, you bring too much and the mind becomes to sink and become unclear. So even though you might be you have some kind of visualization of something or some kind of, you're holding that and you're not being distracted totally to something else, the thing is not clear, so you don't have fully qualified concentration. Here, mindfulness doesn't have so much to do with the clarity aspect. It has to do with the factor of stability. So it says, since the stability of the mind is enhanced in dependence on special mindfulness, its functional feature is specified as that of non-distraction. This mode in which mindfulness possesses the three features is very important in both the contexts of Sutra and Tantra. The protector, or the Lord Nagarjuna, says in the letter to a friend, O Lord, the Sugata taught that mindfulness of the body is the sole path to be traversed. Pay attention and guard it. Due to mindfulness degenerating, all qualities will be destroyed. So if the Buddha taught mindfulness is very, very important. If you're not mindful of what you're doing, if you're not mindful of the vows that you've taken or the decisions that you've made for your life, boy, you're in, what did George Bush say? You're in deep doo-doo. If you're not mindful. Yeah, Venerable.
Is Nagarjuna talking about the first placement, post-placement there?
I think so. Yeah. So sometimes in the people who are adherents of the Satipatthana Sutra, sometimes there's some statements the Buddha said in certain things that this is the sole path, and sometimes in the Mahavipassana Sutra, this is the sole path, almost like the statements attributed to Christ. How's it go? I am the way and the light. The way of, what's it?
The truth, the way and the light.
The way, the truth, and the light. Other than me, there is no way to the Father, something like that. So someone might get incensed, who's a Buddhist might say, well, that's ridiculous. He's not. But you can understand that in the same context. The Buddha said in certain contexts, as mindfulness of the body is the sole path to be traversed. It doesn't mean that that's the only thing ultimately, but you have to do that. Just as I think what Christ meant was, other than by his example, other than by me, I am the way, the truth, and the light, other than by that kind of example of altruism and wise action, there was no way to find the ultimate. So I see that in the same kind of context of statements like this when it says this is the sole path. It doesn't mean that all the other teachings that the Buddha gave about emptiness and bodhicitta are, this is really the main, this is the only thing. It just means that that's sort of like at a certain stage you have to say this is the main thing. Like when you're learning mathematics, if you say, you teach a kid, this is the main thing. If you don't know the numbers, you can't become an accountant. Something high, You can't become, you can't make $1 million. Of course, you need other things too, right? But at that point, that's the main thing. And then in the Bodhisattvacharya Vatara, do I have time yet? Shantideva says, even though learned, having learnedness, being faithful and diligent, many become tainted by downfalls due to committing the fault of lacking introspection. Introspection is another mental factor aligned with, we have to have mindfulness and introspection. Mindfulness is what keeps the mind on an object. Introspection watches whether mindfulness has lost the object or not. It's kind of like a mental spy, right? Though they have amassed merit, these individuals, even if you're very learned in the scriptures, you have a lot of faith and you work hard, right? Even though you've amassed a lot of merit, it is stolen, it is pilfered by the thief of non-introspection, not being aware. You get angry or whatever. It is pilfered by the thief of non-introspection which follows upon degeneration of mindfulness. Therefore they proceed, individuals like that proceed to a bad migration. This band of thieves, sounds like some rock group, right? Band of thieves. The afflictions looks for an opportunity. Upon finding an opportunity, it pilfers, it steals my virtue, and even destroys the life of a good migration. How could it do that? By causing us to create negative karma and to destroy the virtuous karma that we've created. Therefore, mindfulness should never be displaced from the door of the mind. If it does go, recalling the anguish of bad migrations, place it back, like guards with spears standing at either side of the gate of your mind. Due to association with spiritual teachers, the teachings of the abbot, and fear, fortunate ones who act respectfully easily generate mindfulness. So as you might be distracted now is the time to take a break. So we're talking about mindfulness still, and had some good questions during the break. So it has these three features, mindfulness. It has to have a familiar object. Its aspect is, or its nature is non-forgetfulness, and its function is to prevent distraction. Okay, non-distraction. The mode in which mindfulness possesses the three features is very important in both the context of Sutra and Tantra. I mentioned this before. We just read that stanza, and the stanza from the Bodhisattva-charya-vatara. So sometimes in, the 8 verses of training the mind, one of the 3 lojungs that in the Gelugpa tradition are considered, very, very seminal. Do you know what the 8 verses? You know the 8 verses we often recite and things. When His Holiness teaches, it's the shortest. We studied one of the 3 main lojungs. It was called what? Wheel of Sharp Weapons, right? There's another one called the 7-point training of the mind that is quite elaborate. And the 8-point training, the 8 verses of training the mind is quite brief. In there's a verse that says something like this: vigilant of my mind stream throughout all actions. Whenever delusions arise, endangering myself and others, I will confront and avert them without delay. How's it translated there? Something? Same.
Yes.
So this is talking about this mental factor, mindfulness, and the vigilance that goes along with it. Vigilance is what we also called alertness. It's one of the 20 secondary mental factors, I think. I'm sorry, the non-introspection is one of the 20 non-virtuous mental factors, the lack of that. So vigilance, it goes along, vigilance, once we've established some mindfulness, then we can have this state of alertness or vigilance to watch whether we're being mindful. So, vigilant of my mind stream throughout all actions, whenever delusions arise, endangering myself and others, I will confront and avert them without delay. So this is the real practice. I remember someone was, I think, Dorje, you were saying yesterday, how could someone who is sick, how could they, what kind of practice, we could do some pujas or mantras or, poas or some kind of waz or buzz or something to help those kind of people. What can they do? Is it, well, we're going to liberate animals or do this? Main practice is being vigilant of the mind and preventing the intentional, the karma, the creation of karma, negative karma, and replacing it, being mindful of virtuous states of mind, keeping those in mind. So like the example that's given is like the 2 guards, sometimes 2, on either side of the door that are holding spear outside of the king's gates. If someone comes who's not supposed to be there, they're vigilant. It's not like they're just standing there. You've seen the pictures. Has anyone been to Buckingham Palace? Is it Buckingham Palace where the guards are that look? Supposedly they don't move at all if you come up. Probably if you tried to walk by them, they're supposed to be vigilant. It's not like they're just statues or something. So our mind should be like that. We should be vigilant when delusions are arising. So we should have, and the basis for that vigilance is mindfulness, being mindful of the state of our mind, You know? So being mindful means, here, mindfulness means, is not just being aware, right? Mindfulness means keeping in mind something which was previously ascertained, something which is already familiar, rather. So if you're familiar with the peaceful, calm state of the mind, or mindful of your vows, you know, mindful, I will not kill, I will not lie, I will not get angry today. Being mindful of that alone. You know? I will not allow my mind to be overcome by my addictive personality, you know, attachment. You know? Being mindful of that. Whenever that starts to come up, rather than seeing it as a friend, remembering, being vigilant and remembering that's an enemy, preventing it from coming up. So you have to sort of conjoin those two, mindfulness and vigilance. The increase of all excellent qualities of the paths and grounds are contingent upon the two, mindfulness and introspection. Here's another way of translating that. What are the ways I've translated? Introspection, alertness, and vigilance. They're all talking about the same Tibetan word translated in different ways. Introspection, vigilance. What was the other one I said? Alertness. Okay.
So are those all synonyms then?
They're the same word, the same Tibetan word, just different people's attempt at translating it. So you could say they're synonyms, but they're more than, I mean, those might have different meanings in English, so you have to choose which of those words to replicate, to designate this state. You have to choose which one resonates best with your consciousness, that most accurately portrays the sense of that to your mind, whether it be vigilance, introspection, and alertness. Alertness and vigilance both to me sound like a little bit out. If you're thinking about watching the mind, introspection, so inspecting internally. All accomplishments of meditative stabilization of the sutras and tantras are necessarily achieved through this special mindfulness, through the quality of mindfulness. Therefore, this very method of relying on mindfulness is of utmost importance for those who, from their heart, wish to practice sincerely. In this vein, the Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, "Let my gain and honor, my body and livelihood vanish. Let even my other virtues degenerate, but may my mind never degenerate. I urge you, those who wish to guard their minds, to guard your mindfulness and introspection even at the cost of your lives." So, yeah.
Question?
Yes.
So, what happens to mindfulness when somebody's mind actually goes? Like,
Can you say a little bit louder?
What happens to mindfulness when somebody's mind actually goes? Alzheimer's or...
Oh, okay.
What?
I think the capacity to, well, what do we call it in the West? We call it short-term memory, right? Being able to, you know, they may remember while you're right there. They may be aware that you're, I forgot your first name.
John.
John. You know, the John for a couple minutes, and then if they get distracted into something else, they might say, "Well, who are you?" That would be like really lacking. A mindfulness wouldn't be able to perpetuate for any length of time of being aware of who you are. I don't know, I can't say what's happening there, but I have a feeling that those who have cultivated mindfulness throughout their lives, that would be able to, my guess is that would be able to compensate at that time. I don't have any experience in that. It's just my guess. Maybe people that have, this is something that's been known about in the past in monasteries or in religious communities or wherever people have been mindful, that if a lifetime of practice of that prevents that extreme kind of forgetfulness and dementia. We used to call it old age dementia, isn't it? when it came at old age. Now, if it's pre-old age, we try to find some particular biological causes, and they call it, is it Alzheimer's, right?
Well, Alzheimer's.
What's the other one you were saying?
There's two different things. There's Alzheimer's and then there's dementia.
Dementia.
They don't have to be one. They're both kind of a losing up, but they're two different sources.
Two different sources.
Two different things.
Okay, so that's a little bit about the mental factor mindfulness. So we've talked about aspiration, appreciation or belief, and mindfulness. Now the two remaining ones, meditative concentration and wisdom. Let's go on to those. So the next one is Tingne Zen in Tibetan. You see on page 30, which is the Sanskrit, the Tibetan translation for the Sanskrit word samadhi. You've heard of samadhi, right? So this is not the word shine in Tibetan or shamatha. That's another word. What's the difference between samadhi and shamatha? Does anyone know? Don, do you know? Have you heard those terms before?
Yes.
But you don't know? Sweetie, do you know? You've heard?
Certain
Yeah.
words, but I can't tell you the difference.
Take a stab at it. You know, like the $64,000 question. You might as well, you might get it. I mean, rather than just letting the opportunity go. What would you say? What's the difference between samadhi and shamatha? And what's the difference between this mental factor and tranquil abiding? Are there no relation at all? Well, they're all mental factors are related. There's no special relationship between those two, between shamatha and samadhi,
Yes.
any more than any two things.
Shine is calm abiding.
Shine, that's nice. It sounds like some girl's name. Shine.
It's calm abiding, whereas samadhi has a part of the concentration in it more.
Well, isn't shine a concentrated state? Tranquil abiding?
Calm abiding. But you can have calm abiding without without having it go into the mental stabilization.
So which is more deep?
Samadhi.
Tranquil abiding, shine would be more deep, would be.
It is? Okay.
Well,
State.
that's good that you take you have a sense of authority. Do you see that? As soon as you said that, she said, "Oh, it is okay."
I'm sitting in the dark.
That's
I'm
right.
being a detective.
No, that's good.
I actually agree with you because it seems more stabilized in terms of non-attachment, whereas samadhi, for myself, has an aspect of bliss, of
Okay, let's check what the scripture says. Samadhi in general doesn't have to be fully qualified samadhi. Samadhi is a factor that's present in our mind now.
always.
Well, it's one of the object ascertaining mental factors. When we're ascertaining something, we have to have the ability to keep the mind on the object for some moments of time. Not through the factor of mindfulness, but just by this factor of samadhi. But that kind of samadhi, what we have now, is not fully qualified samadhi. The first fully qualified samadhi, when you have control over it, is called shine, is called shamatha. So shamatha is a samadhi, is a kind of samadhi, but not all samadhis are shamatha. There are other kinds of samadhis, even very deep samadhis, that the bodhisattvas have hundreds and thousands of different kinds of samadhis. Samadhi, S-A-M-A-D-H-I, samadhi. And shamatha, S-H-A-M-A-T-H-A, samatha. It's not, when there's T-H, it's not tha. Like sometimes people say Theravadin or Thuptin. Have you ever heard? Thuptin. Thuptin. It's actually, in Sanskrit and in Tibetan, that aspirated is an aspirated T, the TH. So instead of saying Theravadin, it's actually Theravadin, sort of like a little bit air coming out extra more than just an ordinary T. and shamatha. Okay. Let's see here. So let's go. Let's check here. Tignes and samadhi, from the Abhidharma Samuccaya. This is the Mahayana. Pardon?
Can we get a definition of each of those?
Well, we're going to have a definition of samadhi now. Okay, let's do that first, because we'll talk a little bit about shine. What is meditative stabilization? It is a one-pointedness of the mind with respect to an imputed thing. It has the function of acting as a support for wisdom or knowledge. So sometimes it's called, sometimes this is translated, samadhi or tinizin is translated as single-pointed concentration. Sometimes it's just translated as concentration. But there's other words that might be translated as concentration. This is the particular, meditative stabilization is what Jeffrey translated for this, Jeffrey Hopkins. I don't know if that's necessarily a good translation, because it doesn't have to be meditative. It's something that's in our mind now. Single-pointed concentration might be good. So one-pointedness of the mind with respect to an imputed thing. An imputed thing means it's not, this is not a mental factor that's present in the eye consciousness when you're able to keep the eye consciousness focused on one thing. That is not samadhi. And we don't enhance samadhi, or we don't develop it through, using outer objects. Like some people concentrate on a candle. Have you seen? Sometimes I'm meditating. They concentrate on, there's a candlelight. In the Asanga, in his texts, and his brother Vasubandhu mentioned that this is not the realm of samadhi is not in the sense consciousnesses like that, to develop it.
And George, would it be possible, though, by developing concentration on an external object, for that somehow to have the effect of helping actual single-pointed concentration, but somehow...
There's obviously a relationship, because, say for instance, if you're concentrating on if you're keeping your eye on something, your mental consciousness has to motivate that. Right? Like say for instance, I have a friend, one of my godson, or my Buddhist son in New York, Raffaello. My friend Diana, when she had a son, she asked me to, you know how you usually have someone as a godfather? So I was the Buddha father. So Raffaello. So Raffaello has is very, very, he can keep his concentration for a moment, but that, And so sometimes when we sit and meditate, I just ask him to look at the clock and watch the hand for 30 seconds. And that can help to cause the mind to calm down, to develop some kind of concentration. But it's not, the samadhi itself is not being generated in the eye consciousness. We'll see. In fact, it comes up here in talking about that. As has been said above, it is a one-pointedness of the mind. That means it doesn't, it's keeping on one thing, right? That, within observing an imputed thing, that is a object of mental consciousness, is continuously set upon it. The objective feature of meditative stabilization, or we can call single-pointed concentration, because I don't think it has to be meditative. That's why I say that it's something that's even in an ordinary person's mind. The objective feature of single-pointed concentration is specified to be an imputed thing, quote unquote, because when cultivating meditative stabilization, single-pointed concentration, one holds the mind to an object of observation that is imputed by the mind. For instance, when you're watching, Lama Yeshe used to say that the mindfulness, close placement of mindfulness on the breathing, when you're watching the breathing, that's called mindfulness of the breathing. It's not called single-pointed concentration on the breathing. Why not? Because that is an object which is moving. It's impermanent. things that are imputed by the mind, mental image is something which is constant. And so you can develop single-pointed concentration on the basis of that with your mental concentration. Whereas just concentrating on the breathing doesn't allow that. It said, I think our friend Alan Wallace, you know Alan Wallace? Was a monk for many years, Jampa Khalsa. One of his what do you call it, wishes, sort of deep desires, is to develop single-pointed concentration, because he would quote Geshe Rapton as saying, in the Gelugpa tradition it says, unless you have single-pointed concentration, it's very difficult to develop bodhicitta in one lifetime. I think that, so he had a very noble reason for wanting to develop single-pointed concentration. Shine, fully qualified samadhi. Because if you have that, then whatever virtuous action you do can be really strong. You can develop bodhicitta quickly and other kinds of wisdom and so forth. Without samadhi, it's difficult. So he used to have this question, because he studied in the Theravada tradition also, how they develop, they do close placement of mindfulness on the breathing. It seems like something which is moving. So he investigated and asked some of the Theravada masters also, if I recall his explanation, and in their tradition, it said that, indeed, that's true, that what happens is that through mindfulness of the breathing, at the end of watching it for a long period of time, you can develop a mental image of the wind element, the air element, the subtle air element. It's not like it's like a shape or color, but a mental image of what that is, motion. Because each of the four elements has a definition, right? The earth is that which is hard and supporting, or something like that. So one of the aspects, one of the qualities of air element or wind element is that which is moving. So by watching, being mindful of the breathing, you eventually develop a mental image. And it's upon that you actually, those who follow that kind of the satipatthana, the close placement of mindfulness methodology, it's through that you eventually develop single-pointed concentration when your mind has been calmed a lot. Watching the breathing is very, very good, because it is a particular method for overcoming conceptualizing mind, discursive thought, because the discursive thoughts are very much on the airs in the two side channels, the 72,000 nadis, the winds that are outside the central channel. Venerable.
I'll ask Rita, actually, it's a little bit off the topic.
Oh.
If that's okay.
Okay. Excuse me. So the objective feature of meditative stabilization is specified to be an imputed thing, because when cultivating meditative stabilization, one holds the mind to an object of observation that is imputed by the mind. Furthermore, although there appear to be many enumerations of objects of observation for meditative stabilization, for single-pointed concentration, when condensed, it is taught that there are four categories. So this is talking about fully qualified for developing single-pointed concentration. But single-pointed concentration doesn't have to be, it's a feature of our mind now. It's with any kind of consciousness, when we hold the mind to an object for some period of time. Let me see, in Geshe Rapton's text, he just calls it concentration. Steve Batchelor translated, probably originally Gonzo Tuku translated, and Steve edited and made more precise. Concentration is a distinct mental factor that is capable of dwelling one-pointedly, bearing the same aspect for a sustained duration of time upon a single referent. It has the function of acting as the basis for the increase of intelligence and bringing all mundane and supramundane phenomena under control. Geshe says, concentration exists to some degree in the minds of us all. At present, this faculty may be undeveloped and only able to remain on one object for a very limited duration. So even when, Dorji's quite good, a couple of seconds, you said you could remain on an object a couple of seconds, Dorji. Right? Even that's, most people getting, even to remain, when you try to watch your breathing, how long can you remain on that? That's something similar to, that's not actually concentration, that's mainly the the mindfulness. Even that is difficult, to be mindful. But with continuous effort and practice, its ability to dwell one-pointedly upon a single object can be developed until, in a state of total mental quiescence, one may remain for days concentrating on a particular object. Furthermore, beings who have taken birth in one of the formless realms can spend eons absorbed in concentration on extremely subtle objects, such as the infinity of space and the infinity of consciousness. Concentration is also an important factor in the heightening of intelligence. When we are taking a photograph, the steadier we hold the camera, the sharper will be the picture. Similarly, the firmer and more intense our concentration becomes, the sharper and more acute becomes our intelligence. Okay? So we do have a concentration now, but it's not as developed as it can be. So there are different kinds of objects of concentration, and if you have either the Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, the Lanrim text by Pomoko Rinpoche, which is a kind of commentary to some of the great Lanrim texts, or if you have the Lanrim Chemo, I hope I brought the right volume, volume 3. This is the section that's called, in Tibetan we call Lakton Chemo, the great section on Vipassana, but it's about Shine and Lakton, about tranquil abiding and penetrative insight. So in here it talks about what are the, if you're going to try to develop Shine, you need to have an object. What should you choose? The breathing, Buddha, Tumo, the emptiness of the mind, Mahamudra? What's the best object to use?
Depends on the level where you start.
Depends on the level you start?
Where you are.
Where you are? Those are good. Okay. So the Buddha taught different kinds of objects. They could be all divided into these 4 kinds of objects. Objects of observation for purifying behavior, objects of observation for purifying the afflictions, the pervasive objects of observation, and objects of observation for developing skill, or skillful object of observation.
Can you repeat those, please?
They're on page 31. I'm just reading them. Yeah, it's easy. So, the objects of observation for developing skill, the 4th one, are taught to be of infinite types, such as, say for instance, to develop skill and means, or skill, one can meditate on the 5 aggregates, the 12 entrances, or the 18, what do we call them, elements, or dhatus. Remember when did we talk a little bit in some of the other classes about the Buddha explained that all impermanent phenomena can be divided into 5 aggregates. Do you remember that, Venerable? All impermanent phenomena can be divided into 5 aggregates.
You mean what are the 5 aggregates or something different?
The 5 aggregates only refers to the person, do you think? Remember when we talk about the 5 aggregates? We think that only refers to the person? The person is an impermanent phenomena. And the Buddha did say the person could be divided into these pancha skanda, 5 skandhas, or 5 aggregates, 5 heaps. But all impermanent phenomena, whatever impermanent phenomena there are, can be divided into 5 heaps. Those that are, what? Form, those that are feelings, those that are discriminations, those that are compositional factors, and those that are consciousness. Is there something that's left out from that? Impermanent phenomena?
Non-associated, what is it?
Non-associated compositional factors. So the compositional factors aggregate includes both associated and non-associated compositional factors. So associated compositional factors means compositional factors that are associated with the mind, like mental factors. Non-associated compositional factors means phenomena that are impermanent, that are neither material nor associated with the mind. So all impermanent phenomena can be divided into 5 aggregates. You can't put permanent phenomena into any one of those aggregates, though, like space or cessation or emptiness or so forth.
But a cup's impermanent.
Pot is?
A cup?
A cup is impermanent? Yeah.
And it doesn't have feeling.
Cup doesn't have feeling, right? It doesn't have to be, actually cup is just, could be put into what? The material, just in the form aggregate. Say for instance, once a corpse, you could say a corpse doesn't have feeling, George. A corpse doesn't have discrimination or the other 51 mental factors, nor does it have what? Consciousness. But it's a manifestation of our form aggregate, right? Without the other. So it's just form. So sometimes in analyzing phenomena, we analyze phenomena in terms of, to develop skill, we analyze the 5 aggregates. In another way, the Buddha taught you can divide all phenomena into the 12 entrances. Do you remember what we call it? The ayatana? That doesn't sound, I'm pronouncing it properly. It sounds like the Ayatollah. The ayatana. Do you know what the ayatanas are? Do you know? Oma, you're shaking your head. Keche in Tibetan. So sort of like the entrance, sometimes they're translated as the entrances. How does she translate here? Entrances? Observation of the sources. Entrances or sources. Sometimes they're called the sources, sometimes they're called entrances. Again, there's just different translations of the same word. Ayatana, Keche in Tibetan. So what that means, remember there are 3 conditions for consciousness to arise? What are the 3 conditions?
I don't remember.
You just remember that there are 3. That's good. Mark, do you remember?
The object, previous moment of consciousness, and the supporting sub, the organ.
Yeah. So the dominant condition, which is the faculty, the immediately preceding condition, which in this case is a preceding moment of consciousness, and the objective condition, which is something that has to be perceived. When those 3 come together, there can be the arisal of consciousness. So the door or source of consciousness, we could say, if we talk about any one of the consciousnesses, there are going to be 2 doors for each of the consciousnesses to rise. That is the object and the sense base. 2 sources of the consciousness arising, right? Say for eye consciousness to arise, you need the source or entrance of the eye faculty, and you need an object. Then, of course, you need the immediately preceding, but that's the arisal of the consciousness. Okay? So there are 12 entrances. That is, the entrance, what we say the eye entrances are visible forms and eye faculty. The ear entrance or ear source or ear ayatana are what? Sounds and the ear faculty. And the nose consciousness, taste consciousness, body consciousness. What is the mental consciousness? What are the doors to mental consciousness or the entrance, mental consciousness entrance? What are its objects? Well, the mental consciousness can know all objects, but its particular objects are called phenomena, dharmas. So those are called dharma ayatana. And the mental organ is a previous moment of any of the consciousnesses, right? So those are called the 12 entrances. So developing skill in these, also dividing all phenomena up into 12 entrances. All phenomena can be divided into these 12 entrances, not just the impermanent ones. On other occasions, the Buddha talked about dividing all phenomena into 18 dhatus. The 18 dhatus. You know the word dhatu, right? Elements or constituents. I think she translates here constituents. Actually, it's similar to the 12. Now if you add the 6 consciousnesses, for each of the 6 senses, you've got 3 things. You've got a faculty, you've got the object, those constitute the entrances, and the consciousness itself. So 3 times 6 is 18. Those are the 18 dhatus. How can it be that the 12 can include everything? Where does consciousness go? Gotcha. What? In the mental what? say we have, if we talk about the 12 entrances, supposedly all phenomena, permanent and impermanent, can be put into one of these categories of the 12 entrances. Also, another way of mapping them all is 18 dhatus, which is bigger classification than the 12 entrances. It includes the 6 sense consciousnesses also, right? I mean the 6 consciousnesses, 5 senses and the mental consciousness. So how can the 12 encompass the 18? Because the 18 include the 6 consciousnesses. Where can they be found in the 12 entrances? This is not 12, but I'm going to say.
Perhaps it's in the 12, it's not actually spelled out, but it's assumed that the consciousness is there.
Where? Which one? Is it the form entrance? No, because that's visible forms. Is it the form faculty? No, that's material. Is it the ear entrance, which are of two kinds? The sounds? No. Consciousness is not sound. Is it the ear faculty? No, that's material. It's not none of the 5 faculties. It's not the Dharma ayutana, the Dharma entrance, because that's talking about other kinds of phenomena, but it's talking about the mental entrance, which is any of the other 6 consciousnesses. That includes all the conscious. That one entrance includes all of these other 6 things in the 18 dhatus. You have to sort of write it down to take a look, and then we'll talk about this later. See if you can sort of ruminate about this. Does it make some sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Buddha said that certainly all impermanent phenomena could be divided up in all 3 of those ways. Sometimes when you divide up the person, you divide up the person into 5 aggregates, 12 entrances, 18 elements. What's another way of dividing up the person? Into the 5 or 6 elements, right? Have you heard? What are the 6 elements or 5 elements? Sometimes we talk about 5 elements. We talk about the 4 elements: earth, water, wind, and fire, and consciousness element. And then you can add the space elements, 5 or 6 elements, depending on the context you're talking about. So sometimes in Nagarjuna's text, he says the person is nothing more than the 6 elements, these kind of elements. So you can divide it up into different ways. Here, those are called, when you get skill in those different kinds of things, it's called the objects of observation, and also observation of the 12 links of dependent arising, and so forth. Those are objects of observation for developing skill. Now, what are the objects of observation for purifying behavior and for purifying afflictions, and the pervasive objects of observation? Well, you can find in either the Lamrim Chamo or any of the texts that talk about concentration in the Namdo Lakchang, the liberation in the hand. So here on page, if you have this volume 3 of the Lamrim Chamo, on page 35, it says the objects of meditation themselves. The Bhagavan stated that the yogis have 4 types of objects of meditation, these being universal objects of meditation. What's that? The pervasive, puts that first. Objects of meditation for purifying behavior. Objects of meditation for expertise. What is that? Skill, right? Objects of meditation for purifying afflictions. Okay, so all 4 are here, just in a different order. So the universal or pervasive objects of meditation are of 4 types. Discursive images, non-discursive images, limits of existence, and achievements of your purpose. So that's something you can investigate. Basically, it's talking about how you can encompass all objects of meditation can be put into that one category. It pervades everything. The objects of meditation for purifying behavior are objects that purify behavior in which attachment or the like, such as hatred, pride, discursiveness, are predominant. And there are 5 such objects of meditation. So there's meditation on ugliness or repulsiveness. What's that an antidote for? For purifying attachment. So it's said that when a meditator wants to try to develop samadhi, if their primary obstacle, something that's preventing their attaining that is attachment or lust, then they take as their object to purify that behavior, what's it called? Not just ugliness. What did I say before?
Disgust?
Disgust. That's the word. Yeah, disgust. Repulsiveness. Yeah. Midukpa sort of means unattractiveness. So you might sometimes, if we meditate, we see from Shantideva's explanation in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the Shantideva saying the woman's body is a pile of pus and this and that, and you might think, whoa, he's really, these are men, Actually, it's the nuns are supposed to meditate the same way. It's not like the guy's body is something special, right? So to overcome that kind of first obstacle, that kind of obstacle in which you have strong attachment to physical form, you meditate on the repulsiveness. Even you can meditate on even on other kinds of things. You can meditate on the mocha soya coffee. Was it mocha soya? Yeah, something like that. Something like that. Had some special imputation. Close enough. You could meditate on how it, 5 minutes after you drink it or whatever, it has become partially urine, partially, the components of excrement, and sometimes some elements in your blood, that there's nothing inherently pure about it, that its actual nature is repulsive. That helps to overcome that compulsive lust or attachment to things. So that's one of the first ones. Then there's meditation on love. What does that help to overcome? What kind of behavior? Hatred, yeah, hatred and anger. Dependent arising. That's to overcome ignorance in general. Differentiation of the constituents. That's to overcome pride. You have to understand this. You have to, there's an elaborate meditation the Buddha taught. Whenever you have any kind of phenomena, you have analyzed all the different, that the Buddha understands, all the constituents and all of the interconnectedness between these things. This helps to, when you realize how little you do understand, your pride can go down. And meditation on inhalation and exhalation, on the respiration. This is particularly for individuals who are overcome by discursiveness. So that sort of the Satipatthana, when you begin watching, what's it called? I forgot, the Anapanasati. Anapanasati means what? Sati again means mindfulness, right? Anupanu means inhalation and exhalation. And Pali and me. So these are called the objects of meditation of purifying behavior. Then there are the objects of meditation for expertise, such as the aggregates, the constituents, that means the dhatus, the sources, that means the ayatanas, the 12, dependent arising, and here it says what is and is not possible, states and non-states. Do you know what that is? That's meditation on karma. That is, virtuous karma can only give rise to something which is conducive within cyclic existence, pleasure or higher rebirth. That's a state. That's possible. Virtuous karma cannot give rise to negative experiences. Anything which is negative can only arise from negative karma. This is meditation on states and non-states, among other things. And then the last set of objects is the objects of meditation for purifying the afflictions. So you might have thought these other ones were for purifying the afflictions, like meditating on repulsiveness and love and so forth. Here, what does it say? Purifying afflictions means either means either merely reducing the strength of the seeds of the afflictions or else utterly eradicating the seeds. That would be my meditating on emptiness, the latter, right? In the former case, the objects of meditation are the comparative coarseness of each lower stage and the comparative calmness of each of the higher stages. So this one is mainly talking about the meditation on what are called mundane and supramundane vipassana. You've heard of vipassana, right? Vipassana, penetrative insight. Mundane vipassana is the observation of the desire realm, seeing the shortcomings of this in comparison to the first concentration, and seeing the benefits of the first concentration. And so, in so doing, extricating your mind from the level of the desire realm and elevating it to the level of the first concentration. And likewise, developing all of the dhyanas, the 4 concentrations and the 4 formless absorptions, or in the Pali tradition they're called jhanas. And supramundane vipassana, how to eliminate so that only eliminates the development of the concentrations, separates you from attachment, separates you from these delusions temporarily, but while you haven't eliminated the seeds of them. Whereas if you meditate on supramundane vipassana, meditating on what? Emptiness, selflessness of the person, selflessness of phenomena, that's a way to eliminate all of the afflictions from the root. So that's a little explanation. You can elaborate that further. Whenever the Shine is taught, those objects of observation, of tranquil abiding are taught. Here it's just talked about the objects of samadhi in general, but this is only in terms of samadhi as an elevating factor. Nowadays, it seems that there are some instructions at odds with the wording of the Conqueror's scriptures that clearly teach the method of performing staring meditation, staring at a candle or something, within observation of a form appearing to eye consciousness. However, Arya Asanga, who is Arya Asanga? Is that Asanga's brother? Now, Arya is just a title, right? It means the noble Asanga, the one who is an Arya, clearly stated that meditative stabilization or concentration, single point of concentration, is not produced in sense consciousness. So anyone who follows Asanga, this is one of the things, sometimes people on one part of their scriptures will be relying on Asanga as a perfect master, but then they're not familiar with all of the teachings that he gave. He said that, clearly stated that concentration, single point of concentration, is not produced in sense consciousnesses. Rather, it is only produced in mental consciousness. Moreover, its object of observation is not form appearing to sense consciousness. Rather, it is only a mental object imputed by the mind, only mental image that you take. When you're actually developing single point of concentration like that, it's that which you're focusing your mental concentration on, mental image, whether it be mental image of Buddha. Remember I said before, the first stage is finding the object. So to find the object, if you're visualizing, that's a bit difficult because it doesn't appear to your mind directly. You have to construct that through familiarity. Do you have samadhi visualizing your boyfriend or girlfriend or your imputed boyfriend or girlfriend? I was just joking. Do you have any samadhi on that? Yeah, it's easy for the call, or mom, or your son, or your daughter. Easy for that image to call up because of familiarity, and you have their moments when you concentrate on that, single-pointedly. So, to do it with respect to things that we're not familiar with, like Buddha or Tara or something, you have to find that object by bringing it to mind, either by looking at a statue and a tanka and then trying to recall that, or by reminding yourself the hands are like this, the arms are like this, one hand is holding a begging bowl, one is over the knee, he's wearing saffron robes, his legs are crossed, the soles of his feet have the Dharma chakra in them, the nails are copper colored. Reminding yourself discursively like that, that's called analyzing. It's, in a sense, it's kind of like between the two, stabilizing meditation and analyzing meditation, or analytical meditation. It's analytical meditation first, to develop the mental image. Then, once you get that, you stabilize on that with single-pointed concentration. You have to find the object first. How about finding the object of, for the meditation purifying the behavior of hatred? What's that meditation? Meditation on love. How do you find that object? You just say, what's that? Love. Love. Was it love is all there is? What was that?
Exciting.
All you need is love. Is that how you meditate on love? Resonating? What do you think, John? Is it John?
Yeah, that's John. Probably on the object of love, something like that.
How do you find what? Well, this is a little bit different. This is talking about concentrating on the subjective state of love that you have to develop through. Again, you have to analyze first. Generally, we'll put people into the three categories of friends, which are easily to imagine a state of love toward, some affection toward them. Strangers, maybe, I don't love the bus man, or, collector, or some of the people I don't know. Enemies, very difficult for us to imagine love for at first. So first one has to overcome that, first equalize them and actually generate a positive sense of affection for them through logic, through wisdom. Realize that's one of the methods, to realize that they've been your mother, to realize that they're benefiting you, they've been kind even when they've been enemy and so forth, and that they want to be happy and so forth, that it's to your benefit that they be happy. For the materialistic person, that would make a lot of sense, If the enemies are happy, I profit. The markets still go on. If there's not conflict in South America, I still have a good market. So, you can use that at first with the course mind to overcome the hatred. So you have to find the object of love. Love is not like an objective object like the appearance of Buddha that you imagine out there. Love, it has these certain qualities. I'm going to concentrate on that. Meditation on love means developing your mind in the aspect of love. Okay? So there are different kinds of ways of analyzing, first of all, to find the object of concentration, and then you focus on that with single-pointed concentration. But you don't use, according to Asanga, according to Kamala Shila in his stages of the path that His Holiness has taught many times about how to develop concentration, bhavana krama, the stages of meditation, rather. Bhavana means meditation, right? Krama means stages. So that's the Gomrim. Did His Holiness taught that here in California? He's taught it in several places in elaboration. Text by Kamala Shila, who had actually come to Tibet, was one of the great Indian sages.
He's teaching it in Scotland.
He's teaching it in Scotland. So if you want to come and learn a wee bit more about the Bhavana Krama, which one is he teaching? There's 3 volumes.
I can't remember, sorry, I don't remember. I was going to look at it again, but it's one of the.
So there's a very famous text that's a basis for the explanation of how to develop single-pointed concentration. Also, Maitreya's Madhyanta Vibhagna and others that talk about how to develop concentration, and other sutras. So they all say that you don't take, that single-pointed concentration is not developed with objects of eye consciousness. But as Brish said, there may be some efficacy for a beginner to focus, because you're focusing the sense consciousness on something, indirectly you're focusing the mental consciousness on that. But that's not an infallible method to develop concentration. Just sitting for days in a cave watching a candle. Of course, you have to change the candle. That's the problem, isn't it? Unless you have an electric light that you're concentrating on.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So then introspection or alertness is definitely part of analytical meditation, right? Because You need to be watching and making sure.
It's present also in between the two, stabilizing meditation and in analytical meditation. All meditation can be put in those two categories. The supreme stabilizing meditation is calm abiding, tranquil by shamatha. Supreme, fully qualified, let's say. Fully qualified analytical meditation is vipassana. But even before we have the fully qualified stabilizing meditation, even if we're stabilized on something for a few moments, that can be put under the umbrella of the general category of stabilizing meditation. And when we analyze something, that can be put under the umbrella of analytical meditation, investigation. But even when we're trying to stabilize on something, we still have to have the mental factor of alertness that just knows whether you've lost the object. Once you've lost the object, you have to apply an antidote, so you have to leave the stabilization in order to recover it. But once you're in the stabilization, that's not called, you're not analyzing then, you're just being vigilant whether you've lost the object. Once you've lost the object, and you know that through introspection, then you no longer have the stabilization, and so you have to analyze, maybe if you're being distracted to something, to see the disadvantages of that or apply the antidotes. Okay. So there's a qualm or question. Well then, there's una, it's better. Does the object of meditative stabilization definitely have to be a real object? The answer is no. Whether the object is real or wrong, real or erroneous, if one attentively familiarizes oneself with it internally, over and over again, clear appearance and non-conceptuality with respect to that object will arise. How can you have a non-conceptual mind that is, to which a non-existent is appearing? Remember, in low rig, that was one of the categories. Non-conceptual mind to which a non-existent clearly appears. Such as the meditator meditating on the whole ground, the whole earth being pervaded by skeletons, by bones, and things like that. So this is a good time to stop for a lunch break, because we need some sustenance. Let's just dedicate briefly, and then we talk at lunch, and we'll continue this afternoon. Let's try to dedicate the merits that we have created so far. With conventional dedication, first of all, aspiring that these merits ripen in particular ways. Sometimes we can dedicate particularly, for the long life of our gurus, for the proliferation of the Dharma, for our own realizations, bodhicitta and so forth, to increase that we follow the Bodhisattva's activities, and so forth. Particularly dedicate the merits. In general, you can say, due to these merits, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha in order to lead each and every sentient being to that very state. So we're thinking of the merits that we've created this morning and this life, and linking them to that state, our eventual achievement of enlightenment for the welfare of sentient beings. So you're making a firm decision, a wish that these merits ripen in that way. And in so doing, seal it within the sphere of emptiness, knowing that if you can, even you conceptualize these things as real, that merit that you've created can be destroyed by anger and wrong view and abandoning the Dharma and so forth. So meditate on the emptiness of the merits that we're imagining dedicating. They're only imputed by the mind. Can't be found from their own side, but still function. It's not an erroneous, total imagination. The goal dedicated to is empty. that is our own enlightenment, is just a state imputed, doesn't exist from its own side. And the act of dedication, the dedicator, the linking of these merits with those goals, also can't be found from its own side as just a dependent arising phenomena, empty of true existence. It still functions.